You're listening to Sacks in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sacks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at sacksinthebasement.com.
Once again, welcome to Socks in the Basement, where normally we'd be sitting down at the 9-foot homemade oak bar, except that's under lock and key because Chris is away this week. So, belly on up to 6-foot pressboard desk. You can still crack open a cold one, I don't mind. And as always, Socks in the Basement is brought to you by Family Waterproofing Solutions. If you got water coming into your basement, get it kicked out, call Family Waterproofing Solutions, or go to familydry.com and mention Socks in the Basement. They'll take extra good care of you. So, it's the second half of the season. It is the grind. This is the Sox' toughest part of their schedule coming up. A lot more teams over 500 than what they've been facing. And why not get a player's perspective on what the guys on the 26-man, not the 40-man, are going to go through in the second half of the season, because we could parse about what they did this week, and we could get into a lot of different things about how they could have changed anything in a game or in at bat or something like that. But in the bigger picture, we want to know what these guys are going through. We want to have a feeling for how these things are working. So joining me today on the phone is the Pope himself, Don Pall, former White Sox reliever. I know people know you as the Pope. Do you mind if I use the nickname, or is that something that you're kind of done over with?
No, that's fine. Some people still call me Pope.
I imagine you're never going to get away from it.
No, that's fine. You know, it's kind of an amusing nickname, I guess. Kind of interesting, and I laughed when they gave me that nickname. I thought it was kind of fitting because I'm Catholic and I'm Polish, like the Pope was when they gave it to me. Like, all right. It works. And
I will say it would have been better had you been Don Paul II, though.
Yeah, right. Believe it or not, I actually got some hate mail from people ripping into me for proclaiming myself the Pope, calling myself the Pope, like I made it up myself, and everybody, please call me this. You know, it's kind of amazing some of the mail you get sometimes.
So, in no way, shape, or form did they recognize that it was just something that Hawk and Wimpy were doing to keep themselves amused during the games, just giving out weird nicknames?
It's my fault. I made it up. I'm calling myself a Pope.
I'm not going to get into a religious theological discussion, but Don, thanks for coming on. And so you spent, 10 years in the majors, right?
Yeah, up and down, but parts of 10 seasons in the major league. 7 full years, but parts of 10.
So as people are picking up on this particular episode, we're a week into the second half of the season. So, I know there's the old cliches about the dog days and all that stuff, but this really is kind of the toughest part of the Sox schedule. So as a player, how do you prepare to get into that second half? I mean, is it something where, you're hitting the refresh button and it's just you treat it as a second season, or, are they going to struggle potentially coming out of the gate if there's too much pressure?
Well, I don't think there's too much pressure at all. I mean, it's nice that they've got this 8-game lead or so in their division at this time, starting the second half. So I don't think that is nice to have. So, I mean, they can actually, and hopefully they don't just relax, because we saw what happened last year when they kind of relaxed towards the end of the season. All of a sudden, you lost your momentum and things. So you still need to keep everything going and keep going strong and going all out to win every game still. You still have to have all that, but it's a heck of a lot nicer to be in the lead or battling for the lead as opposed to being one of those teams that are 12, 15 games out of first place. I mean, then it really becomes a grind to, go there every day to the ballpark and, still, give your best effort, of course, and all. But it's when you're totally out of it, then, man, those August days are really tough.
Mentally, it sounds like it's easier to be in the lead and coming out and trying to win a division title than being a team that's behind or being a team that is, frankly, that's out of it, right?
Well, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I say if you're out of it, it's hard. You're just playing for other teams who are watching to trade for you, or you're playing for a contract next year. So it's definitely a lot tougher to be there every day than if you're in the race somehow. Either in the race or leading the race is where you want to be for sure at this point.
So in that regard, like for example, the fact that last weekend Lance Lynn gets extended, he's obviously was coming up into a contract that year. There's a guy that's a little bit older. Does that help him? Do you think coming out, going through the second half now, he's battling for a division title, he's battling for a playoff spot, and he knows that this is the team he's going to be with for the next couple of years?
I don't know. It's funny how some players, and again, I think everybody's different, but there are some players that I've seen happen that once you got that guarantee for a couple more years, all of a sudden, for some reason, they're not as focused as they were before. If you're playing for a contract every year, it doesn't make sense, but sometimes it happens where you see guys have their best years when they have to do it. They know they're playing for a contract, as opposed to it helps them getting the guaranteed money and stuff. And I'm not saying that all that's going to happen to Lance Lynn here in this situation. I'm just saying I've seen that in the past with a number of players. So you just don't know how a player's going to react to that. But Lance Lynn's been around for a while. He's a veteran. He's done a great job. I would think that's not going to affect him, than knowing that he's got the comfort of a couple more year contract going. So I think he'll be fine and go about business the same way he always has. Hopefully so, anyway.
A little bit of a science experiment then, if they don't extend Carlos Rodon in the same fashion. You got one guy going for a contract, you got one guy not going for a contract, both fighting for the same playoff spot, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, we'll see how those two comparing on the stretch here. It is interesting.
Do you think it's a potential concern to have too much of an easy path, especially if the Indians continue to fall and the Twins and Tigers and the Royals all haven't proven that they're having much in the tank this season? Does that become an issue too, where if the division isn't really much in question in the second half, the guys are maybe going to start taking a break or taking a breather where they shouldn't?
I think so. I do. And there's some teams that it's hard to say, because there's some teams that have run away with their division and kept running away in the playoffs and just kept winning and winning and winning, and they had no problem. But there's other teams that have taken the foot off the gas pedal and all of a sudden lost that edge and kind of struggled as it comes to the playoffs. So sure, you'd rather have a big cushion on one side of the coin, and we'd like to have that big cushion, but I'd almost like to have a closer race so that all the way through. So you're mentally you're just so focused, and you keep that focus right through September and into October. So I would rather have a closer race, really. As long as we end up winning it, of course. But I like to have that competitive close thing all the way through, because I do have concerns about things happening like they did last year.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what's on people's minds last year is watching the team clinch early, fade a bit, and then come out flat against Oakland. Although I know, Chris always talks about on the show, and he and I are in agreement on this, that even with somebody like Eloy Jimenez not being hurt, it might be a different series, at least against Oakland, but then going forward, who knows?
Yeah.
And then on the bullpen side of things, there was some retooling coming out of the All-Star break. As far as guys going down, a couple new old faces coming up, so to speak. What do you think went on in the first half with guys like, say, Evan Marshall, who much better in the past, struggling this year a little bit? Is that something where it's maybe a physical, mechanical thing that Ethan Katz has to work out, or is it for you when you were playing? How much of it from year to year was mental versus physical to try and carry over when you had success?
Well, it's tough. It seems like I've noticed that a lot of relief pitchers, they can come and go. They can be great one year. It almost seems more apt for some of these relievers to be really good one year and not so good all of a sudden the next year. I'm not quite sure why, but it just seems like that can be more of the case. And it's hard to say, because certainly so much of the game is mental. It really is. As soon as you think you got it figured out, you're in big trouble. But you just got to stay, aggressive and be learning every day, and never feel like you've got it figured out and you're owning people. So mentally, it certainly is a tough thing. Your mechanics can come and go, and that's why it is important to have a good pitching coach and a bullpen coach, because really to keep you back, get you back on track, because they can certainly come and go too. But it's hard to pinpoint.
When you are headed out to Sox games, you may find in the shadow of the ballpark the good times, good food, and good drinks at Cork and Kerry at the Park. Head on down there, 3259 South Princeton Avenue. Stop in before Sox games, watch Sox away games, stop in after Sox games. Make sure you have yourself one of their fantastic burgers, really any of their fantastic food. Grab yourself a cold beer, grab yourself whatever kind of a beverage you want. Sit back, watch the White Sox out on the road. Sit back, watch a pregame show, relax, and then head on over to the ballpark. Save yourself some money from the concessions. Save yourself some headache and heartache from trying to get down to the park right as everybody else is arriving. Show up early, 3259 South Princeton Avenue. Cork and Kerry at the Park. You absolutely cannot and will not beat it for a place to go before games. So now physically, under normal circumstances, what are you going through as a pitcher getting into that second half, into that stretch run of the season? Is there any issues that you think we're going to have for the Sox this year with fatigue because they weren't built up? That's been kind of a topic that people have been really espousing a lot of nice theories on.
Yeah, I mean, and this theory can go both ways too. You could be fresher because you didn't have as much going on last year, as opposed to a long season with a ton of innings logged or something. So I can see, both sides of that, and I don't know which way it'll play out. But I can equally see both sides of that argument for sure. But yeah, it does start the second half of the season. Guys do start to fatigue somewhat, and we'll see how everybody handles the stuff. But I don't think the shortened season last year will hurt. And if it does, again, everybody's in the same boat, so all the other teams are the same way, so there's absolutely no excuses there too.
Well, yeah, and if there are signs of fatigue with certain pitchers, I mean, you can always shut a guy down for a little bit if there's something wrong, I suppose. But you're right. I mean, everybody else that's in and around them, the Astros, the Rays, the
Right.
Red Sox, whoever, their staffs are going to go through the exact same thing.
Yep.
So when you are getting that sort of fatigue, though, for a pitcher, what goes first? Is it the legs or is it the arm?
A lot of times it is the legs. It is, and you're torn between you want to keep in good shape all year long. You don't want to work out too much that you're fatiguing yourself. You don't want to work out not enough so you're not in shape enough. So it's a delicate balance of how much workouts with your legs and your whole body too that you're going to be doing. To keep yourself in good shape. But yeah, a lot of it just comes from the legs and the core for pitchers. It's a lot of people think it's just the arms, but more of those things come from the legs and the core, really.
Well, and then when the legs and the core start to fatigue, is that when guys will start to develop maybe some arm soreness and issues because they're trying to put more strain up there?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can be. You might be putting more strain, more effort on your arm. Sometimes you might even alter your mechanics a little bit, and when that happens, you really start getting in trouble. If you start altering your mechanics because you're fatigued, a lot of times guys end up hurting their arms because of that.
Well, and we've seen this year, guys are going down with oblique injuries. We saw, some guys go down with hand injuries trying to change their grip after the sticky tack stuff. Is that something is that from maybe not being built up last year, or is that just something where, we're just seeing an odd rash of injuries, you think?
I think it's more of an odd rash of injuries. I just can't get over. I mean, the Sox obviously have a ton of them, but all throughout baseball, there's a ton of guys that have just gotten hurt, just one after another. And I don't know if it's, the way these guys are training, the way they're building up, whatever they're taking in their bodies. I have no idea what's going on, but certainly there's a heck of a lot more, odd injuries going on, much more so than you've kind of ever seen. And I'm not sure what they're going to do about it, but I don't know if guys I can't imagine them playing harder. It's causing them to get hurt. I don't know what it is, but there certainly is, a lot of odd injuries affecting the Sox and everybody else.
I mean, what kind of injuries did you have during your career?
Knock on wood, but all I ever had really was tendonitis in my elbow. One time I was on the disabled list there for a few weeks. It was actually my first season, I think, in the major leagues, really. And after that was all. Which is, I was fortunate, especially because one of my main pitches was fork ball and split finger fastball, and that generally puts more strain on your arm and your elbow. So I think I was probably more prone to injuries, and I was able to kind of avoid that. And part of it, I always said, I felt like I never threw hard enough to get hurt. So I only threw, my fastball was maybe 83, 85 miles an hour, which was below average at that time. And I don't know if that was a part of the reason why I didn't get hurt myself really. Maybe I had better mechanics. Maybe the fact that I didn't put so much stress, like some of these guys do, put stress on their arms by with a violent arm action. But I thought that maybe because I didn't throw that hard, maybe I was able to stay more injury free than some others.
Well, yeah, and I do remember seeing you on the mound, and some guys, I noticed like the effort that they put into it, that's got to contribute, right?
Right, I think so too. Yeah. Maybe the mechanics you have as a pitcher certainly you can get away with them for some time, but if you're repeating it over and over a number of years, if it's not a good mechanics, it can catch up and get you. And also, it's about how you take care of your arm too, your legs and your arm. There's so much into it because, like we talked about, it's all about your legs and your core. So you got to make sure those are built up and strong enough all along the way. But also, you got to be careful on how you work out with the rest of your body. You got to be careful not to be lifting weights, heavy weights. When I was playing, some guys were bench pressing a bunch and doing curls and things, and it makes you your body look better maybe if you're on the beach, but it wasn't good for pitching. It didn't help you as much as a pitcher to be building up muscles in your upper body necessarily.
So do you think pitchers these days, knowing that there's a heavy focus on spin rate, there's a heavy focus on, obviously velocity is way up, you don't see guys throwing 83, 85 mile an hour fastballs, except for maybe like some soft tossing lefties that are still sitting out there. You don't see it from a right-hander much.
No. When I was playing, with somebody who threw 90 miles an hour, that was a big thing. If you're throwing over 90 miles an hour, people were excited about it. Now, if you're throwing 90, you're still below average, it seems like.
So does that put more strain on it, do you think, or is it just somehow guys are bigger, stronger? I mean, is that kind of thing where guys are coming up thinking more about spin and more about, extension and more about getting, that velocity up? Is that going to contribute to fatigue, especially if they're not, like you said, they're not taking care of themselves?
Yeah, I think it does contribute. I think these guys are trying to, put everything into it for maybe one inning or something now, and trying to get that spin rate. It's all about the ray gun, trying to throw as hard as they can. I think all that contributes to more stress and strain on the arm. Than kind of when we were pitching in the old days, quote.
Going back to now being in the second half and going down, to a playoff push. How important do you think it would be for key guys to get, some rest between now and then? Because, if you're, as a reliever, you might get lucky and be on the 0-5 White Sox, where Neil Kotz was the only one to make an appearance, really, up until the World Series.
Right, yeah. I think it is an important thing to rest these guys, at least not overwork them for sure, but even if you can get a little bit lighter load going into, September, October and stuff, I think would be a really good thing to help them out as you start going into the long playoffs.
Sox in the Basement listeners looking for great craft beer on the South Side? We have a spot for you. It's the Blue Island Beer Company. This unique local South Side brewery with an incredible tap room is located in the historical district of Blue Island, Illinois. Live music indoors and outdoors, $1 off drafts on Tuesdays, $3 off growler fills every Wednesday. Incredible beers, great food options. Check out all they have to offer right now at BlueIslandBeerCo.com. Have a beer and watch a game at Blue Island Beer Company, 13357 Old Western Avenue, for that great Blue Island beer.
Blue Island Beer, Blue Island Beer. We are true to the craft, let me be absolutely clear. Blue Island Beer, Blue Island Beer. Let's all pour another round and drink Blue Island beer.
So anybody on the team that as you're watching now as a fan, that you are looking at that guy and thinking, geez, Tony, you better give this guy a break. He's really putting way more into it than he should at this point.
I don't know. I mean, some guys thrive on it. Where like Liam Hendricks, it seems like he wants to be out there every game and pitch as much as possible. So he's got a track record of a heck of a lot of innings, on his arm, and a lot of appearances and things, and I think he's thrived on it. So, I don't know how he would be. Will he be a guy that would tire out towards the end if he continued to have all that? I don't know.
And then what about it? Now, you obviously, as a reliever in the American League, you weren't doing a ton of hitting. I don't have your at-bats in front of me, but do you think the position guys have the same kind of consideration about, having physical fatigue screw with their mechanics and things like that?
I'm not sure about mechanics-wise as far as a position player, but I think there is fatigue as well with the position players too, where, again, you want to be resting these guys where you can, more so in the second half here, especially the hot, humid, muggy days and things. I think it's a good thing to be able to rest, the pitchers and position players where you can, and it's a good thing the Sox have a cushion right now where they can do that to some degree, but you certainly want to be cautious of, like I said, of what could happen. Look what happened last year, where you just don't want to just lose the edge you have, the mental edge, and going into those September, October.
So with the mental edge too, now the one thing that was made of the team coming into the All-Star break was they beat up on the bad teams in the AL Central. They, had a bunch of dates with the Orioles, which never easy to beat a team in the major leagues completely, but the Orioles are kind of that team if you're gonna label one in the American League. So they have this great record against these sub 500 teams, but then they were struggling against 500 teams. They struggled right out of the gate, the first game back with the Astros. And is there something with a team that's coming into a playoff situation, kind of for the first time, that they have, not a mental block, but is there something where, mentally it's a pressing that they're doing to try and get the other contending teams in the AL and go after them? Or is it just come down to sometimes being out executed or just being outplayed?
I think they're just outplayed in those games. I'm not concerned. I mean, of course, you'd like to see them beating everybody, the sub 500 as well as they got teams over 500. But I'm not concerned that they had not been beating, the better teams yet. It seems like this year. I think once you get to, they've done it in the past. They were in the playoffs last year, so they got a taste of it. I think once they get to the playoffs, I think it's a whole new ball game. I think they can go out there and beat just about anybody out there that they're facing. And another big thing too is, hopefully come playoff time, they will be a better, stronger team too with some of these injured guys coming back. I think that's a factor as well, that they're not playing with all the hitters that they need. So they're kind of playing with one arm being tied behind their back right now, I think. And so I think they'll be stronger come later on, and it'll be a different story then, too.
So you're looking ahead, if you're looking ahead to the playoffs, I talked about this with George Offman earlier in the week, and we were talking about who you kind of go with going into the playoffs as far as the rotation. Who do you like opening up game one of the playoffs on this current squad? assuming everyone's healthy and there's no major issues.
Right now, I would go with Lance Lynn as number one. And it's tough because you got four guys who are you almost got four who you could start any of these guys, really. But Lynn, Rodon has been great. You got Giolito, who has not pitched as well this year, but I'd still feel good about having him up there as a number one too. So you got a lot to choose from. But right now, Lynn has done the best. I feel like he's a veteran guy and he's got the mentality. I think I'd almost go with him as number one.
And it is something where you look at the trade deadline, and that's why relievers seem to move every year, is because the best laid bullpen plans for every team seem to have fallen apart sometimes by the first week of the season. Sometimes it's it's absolutely.
That's what happened here. Yeah, it's what happened here with the White Sox. They're coming into the season. They're talking about having the best bullpen in the major leagues. That people are talking about. And I heard some guys on the radio saying, how many blown saves do you think they'll have? How many? Three or four maybe the whole year. And they had like 3 or 4 in the first week, like you're saying. So it's things can change pretty quickly there. Where that was going to be their biggest strength, and it certainly is not right now.
So do you get more concerned about bullpen depth in the second half, or is that something where you figure out what guys are and then you sort of tighten it up as far as who's in what role and who's getting used? That's the one thing that seems to have been dogging people as well. We don't have a lot of guys waiting behind them, but it feels like something where, you get towards playoff time, who your 3-4 guys are that you're really going to rely on, and everybody else is just there if something goes wrong.
Right. Yeah, you definitely do. You want to identify those 4 guys or so that you can rely on, and you can put in there in the so-called higher leverage situations. And it may not be the 4 guys that you identified earlier in the season. So part of it comes down to how have you been for me lately? Who's done better? Where you're at in the totem pole? Because sometimes guys get hot and sometimes they don't. So you want to have your hot hands certainly all lined up there towards the end of the season.
So in a sense, as fans, we can just sit here. We're going through the second half, and looking forward to guys coming back, like you said, off of the injured list, and getting Eloy Jimenez back and getting Luis Robert back, and then we can watch and see how the starters continue on and progress. But from the bullpen standpoint, all the gnashing of teeth and rending of garments and concern could just come down to, let's hope that between Hendricks and 3 other guys, that we've got a hot 4 horsemen of the apocalypse riding into the playoffs, but behind the starters, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they've got 4 or 5 guys there at least who they know they've had a lot of success in the past. Last year or the year before, they've done very well. So it's not like it's some young guys that are not quite sure what they've got. They've got some guys that they know can do really well and they know can succeed and they can rely on. And it's really important for these guys to figure it out and get in their rhythm and groove here in the second half. So,
as we're wrapping up, who would you on the current contenders? Who would you want the Sox to face in the first round if the playoffs were to be granted in their favor?
I don't know who they'd match up best against. Take on whoever, but I guess at this point right now, I'd say avoid Houston if you could, and after that, let's just take them on and get going.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking some baseball with us and giving us a player's perspective on things. It's always good to have you on, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you come playoff time about what playoff baseball is like.
Good. No, happy to do it, Ed.
For Sox in the Basement, he's the Pope Don Pall. I'm Ed Siebert. Could I be a deacon, or is that just strictly Warren Newsom?
Yeah, he's a deacon.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Socks in the basement.
Socks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on socksinthebasement.com.